Most people think alcohol is just a drink, a beer after work, a glass of wine at dinner, something to celebrate with on the weekend. But every time you take a sip of alcohol, you're participating in a story that began millions of years before the first city, the first farm, or even the first human. In fact, alcohol may have helped create civilization itself. And it all started with a piece of rotten fruit. Around 10 million years ago, deep in the forests of Africa, one of our distant primate ancestors stumbled across fallen fruit lying on the ground. The fruit had been sitting there long enough for something interesting to happen. Yeast had begun feeding on its sugars, fermentation had started, and that fruit now contained small amounts of ethanol, the same alcohol found in beer, wine, and spirits today. In 2014, UC Berkeley biologist Robert Dudley published a book called The Drunken Monkey. His theory was simple but fascinating. Primates that could detect the smell of fermenting fruit had an advantage. Fermented fruit was often more calorie-dense and easier to find, so over millions of years our ancestors evolved to seek it out, and when they ate enough of it, they got a little drunk. They didn't understand why it felt good. They just knew they wanted more. Long before humans learned how to make alcohol, evolution had already programmed us to enjoy it, but eventually someone discovered something incredible. What if you didn't have to wait for fruit to ferment on its own? What if you could make alcohol whenever you wanted? For a long time, historians believed alcohol appeared after agriculture. The story seemed straightforward. Humans learned to farm, built villages, and then eventually invented beer. But recent discoveries have completely challenged that timeline. In 2018, archaeologists studying a cave near Haifa, Israel, uncovered evidence that changed everything. The cave, known as Rakefet Cave, was used by a group called the Natufians roughly 13,000 years ago. Carved into the cave floor were large stone mortars. When researchers analysed the residue left inside them, they found something remarkable. Traces of wheat and barley that had been soaked, germinated and fermented. In other words, beer. 13,000 years ago. The shocking part wasn't the beer itself, it was who made it. The Natufians weren't farmers. They didn't cultivate crops, they gathered wild grains and hunted animals. Agriculture didn't even exist yet. Yet somehow these people had already figured out brewing. Think about that for a second. Humans may have learned to make beer before they learned to grow the ingredients needed to make it. And Rakefet Cave isn't the only place where this pattern appears. About 1,000 years later, in what is now southeastern Turkey, hunter-gatherers built one of the most mysterious structures in human history, a place called Göbekli Tepe. Massive stone pillars weighing over 10 tons were arranged in giant circles and covered with detailed carvings of animals. The site is older than pottery, older than farming, older than permanent settlements. For decades, archaeologists struggled to answer a simple question. Why would nomadic hunter-gatherers invest so much effort into building something this enormous? Then came another discovery, large stone vats, and inside those vats were chemical traces of fermented grain. Beer? Again. Not enough for a few people, enough for large gatherings. Today, many researchers believe Göbekli Tepe wasn't a city or a home, it was a gathering place. A place where people travelled from across the region to feast, celebrate, perform rituals and drink together. Which leads to one of the biggest questions in human history. Why did humans start farming? According to archaeobotanist Patrick McGovern, one of the world's leading experts on ancient alcohol, the answer might not be bread, it might be beer. His argument is surprisingly convincing. Making bread requires grinding grain, kneading dough and baking. Making beer is simpler. Add grain to water and let nature do the rest. If ancient people wanted a reliable supply of alcohol, they needed a reliable supply of grain, and that need may have encouraged them to stay in one place and start cultivating crops. If that's true, then alcohol wasn't a product of civilization. It was one of the reasons civilization happened. By around 7000 BCE, alcohol production had become even more sophisticated. In Jiahu, an ancient settlement in central China, archaeologists discovered pottery jars containing residues from a fermented beverage made with rice, honey, grapes, and hawthorn berries. Chemical analysis confirmed the recipe. This is currently the oldest known confirmed alcoholic recipe ever discovered. And it wasn't some accidental mixture, it was carefully crafted, multiple ingredients, carefully selected, deliberately combined. The people who made it